Ideas are like artifacts. They are created by societies in particular times and places for particular reasons. History charts the movement of thoughts, of these ideas. History tracks the possible reasons why some ideas are more resilient than others, and other ideas vanish or go underground. Today, we explore 6 important ideas that the University of the Philippines spearheaded and developed as soon as it was founded in 1908. We begin by thinking that these 6 ideas were completely new in 1900. Welcome to a virtual tour of the Museum of a History of Ideas. This museum is interested in the emergence, growth, and future of ideas, especially the ideas that UP championed. The museum leaves behind the exhausted tradition of merely collecting objects. In this museum, the objects, images, and sounds are devices for remembering the ideas they embody. The museum is located along Padre Faura Street in Ermita, Manila. It is housed in a building constructed in 1931 to serve as a university infirmary from 1931 to 1947. This building is among the few that survived the destruction of Manila at the end of the Second World War in 1945. After the war, from 1959 to 2002, it served as the home of the UP College of Dentistry. It was restored by the architectural firm of Eduardo Calma. Marian Pastor Roses and her corporation Dow Inc. curated the establishment of this first Philippine museum dedicated to examining ideas. It was opened in 2014. This museum only covers the period during which the University of the Philippines was established in the first decades of the 20th century. Marian Roses distilled the university's first intellectual projects into 6 banner ideas. These are the turn-of-the-century concepts that excited intellectuals as high modernity engulfed the world. A modern university, as a place of learning through debate, informed dissent, and period forms of consensus building. The modern, itself as the then globalizing current for deliberately reconstructing reality. The tropics as a geography of study and action. In the Filipino as the embodiment of these ideals. The secular frame of national emergence, deliberately conceptualized as separate from religious power. And the nation as a modern political entity. These ideas were already around in the 19th century but were strengthened with the arrival of American forces in 1898. The University of the Philippines was founded in this site in Malate, Manila as a cornerstone of American colonial policy in the Philippines, the first colony of the United States. It was colonization at the time of pandemics. The UP was firstly the Philippine General Hospital as a tripartite institution, a hospital, a laboratory, and a school of medicine. The focus of UPPGH were viruses starting with the killer strain cholera. Aside from cholera, leprosy, malaria, smallpox, and tuberculosis swept disastrously throughout the country. During the Philippine-American War from 1899 to 1902, the American colonial government paired sanitation and health campaigns with pacification campaigns. Villages were burned to control viruses and to control Filipinos. The new colonizers oversaw a devastating outbreak of cholera in the Philippines in 1902. By 1903, it had already affected 300,000 people, and half of it did not survive the disease. Part of the pacification and sanitation campaigns were draconian measures such as quarantines, detention camps, and enforced isolation of cholera victims. Disinfection squads would regularly go to localities with outbreaks and spray the communities with substances toxic to germs and perhaps also to the residents. Villages were burned to control viruses and to control Filipinos. American military doctors and soldiers took the initiative of delivering primary health care, but they held no trust from the locals, and their knowledge of tropical diseases was insufficient. Delivering tertiary health care was also a problem, as there was a dearth of well-equipped hospitals. Americans needed to invest in medical education, thus setting the stage for modern healthcare in the Philippines. The modern university as sanctuary, not only of learning but of debate, dissent, and period forms of consensus building. The establishment of the university in 1908, emerging from the Philippine Medical School, was one of the first official acts of the American colonial authorities. At the same time, a liberal arts education was established, the College of Fine Arts, which was set up on Hidalgo Street in the district of Quiapo. The college traces its roots to the Academia de Dibujo y Pintura of Damian Domingo, which he founded in 1823. It was integrated with the newly established university in 1909. The Philippine Medical School was established in 1905 to address the public health program of the American colonial regime. It was integrated with the university in 1908 and became the College of Medicine and Surgery. The heart of the concept was and remains academic freedom. The creation of a modern secular university was in contrast to the educational paradigm during the Spanish colonial era, which was very much tied to the church and its teachings. This shift was evident not only in the scientific, humanistic, and technical leanings of the courses, but also in the access given to women for higher education. And in just a few years following its establishment, the university already produced women graduates in different fields. The class photograph of batch 1912, UP's first group of medical graduates, includes Maria Paz Mendoza, the first woman to earn her medical degree in the country, a degree in tropical medicine and public health. UP quickly gained a reputation for greater gender equality than experienced in the larger society outside its campuses. The high modern was carried and conveyed by a university designed to ensure the primacy of science over religion and superstition. The College of Veterinary Science pioneered the crossbreeding of agricultural animals. These developments were to impact the whole attitude of the Philippine government, both colonial and Filipino, towards agriculture itself. Traditional farming knowledge was pushed underground. Microscopes, developed by scientists in the 17th century, paved the way for the observation of microorganisms. However, it would take another 2 centuries before scientists were able to prove that these microorganisms caused diseases. Nevertheless, the development of microscopes did help support what was called the germ theory of disease, technically opening man's eye into a perception of the world where man is not the only one who can control his environment, and where the latter can greatly affect man and his health. This was in contrast to previous theories that believed that diseases spread through foul odors or poisonous vapors, or what was called the miasma theory. According to historian Mercedes Planta, Americans subscribed to the germ theory of disease, albeit with a racializing streak. The Filipinos' ways of life were deemed as not only unsanitary, but it also turned the Filipino body into carriers and incubators of parasites and pathogens. Thus, attempts at sanitizing the Filipinos were predicated on ideas of racial inferiority, vis-a-vis the supposedly stronger and healthier bodies of Americans. In this section, you will see mostly medical technologies that medical professionals of the Philippine General Hospital used in its early years. These implements were considered state-of-the-art during its time. The use of steel, both in building infrastructure and in medical tools and equipment, and other aspects of life, exemplify the spirit of the modern. The operating table, the trays, stools, and other medical equipment you see here exemplify technological advancement. They are instruments designed and engineered to conform to modern medicine's standards and requirements. Initially, only American doctors were allowed to do surgery, and Filipinos were just there to observe, as they were deemed incapable of mastering the sciences. The indomitable spirit of our intellectual forebears proved the colonizers wrong. By 1920, Filipinos were already at the helm of all surgical procedures. The tropics, as a geography of study and action, the environment in which the Filipino exists, was a fascinating and challenging new world for the American colonizers. For the colonial authorities, the tropics presented itself both as challenge and opportunity. The heat and humidity were believed to cause various diseases. The response was to reorder the environment through a public health program that included sanitation drives and hygiene education. At the same time, the rich biodiversity of the tropical forests in the Philippines was attractive to the American colonial authorities. The lush rainforests of Mount Makiling in Los Baños, Laguna prompted the Board of Regents to establish the next campus at the foot of the mountain so they can scale up research that would benefit agriculture and traditional economies in the rural areas. It is also in keeping with the modern imperative to utilize natural resources as efficiently as possible for human needs. It is also part of this cluster of studies that revolved around the tropical, including tropical architecture, tropical diseases, and tropical agriculture. William Parsons, head consulting architect of the American colonial government from 1906 onwards, was key to standardizing the use of reinforced concrete for government buildings. This coincided with the government's sanitation campaign, since concrete walls were easier to clean. Fusing the neoclassical style of architecture with the demands of a hot and humid tropical climate, Parsons designed PGH with wide, interconnected, and open walkways and large windows that provided good ventilation and lighting, but also shielded the interior from the harsh tropical sun. Similar templates would be used for other American hospitals in their tropical territories. The Filipino was a totally new concept during this early period in the life of the UP. The Filipino, a citizen of the archipelago known as the Philippines, which won a war of independence and was waiting for full independence. This Filipino began to believe that higher education would level the playing field in a democracy. But the university students graduated and gained professional expertise in various fields. They became more aware of a bigger community that they needed to see and serve. Soon, the spirit of the university was indigenized by the study of local topics, bringing forward the variety of cultures within the country. Expression of different cultures including dance, music, rituals were recorded and celebrated. Expansion of knowledge about local culture gave Filipinos greater pride in what it meant to be a Filipino. This section features Francisca Reyes Aquino, who pioneered studies on local dances all over the archipelago. There's also the thesis of Dr. Aliston Bautista, who is a known physician and patriot. The thermometer of Dr. Fernando Calderon. He was the first Filipino director of the Philippine General Hospital. With non-American leadership of the PGH, was inaugurated a UP and a PGH that saw itself in service of the citizenry, not colonial administrators. The secular was the frame of national emergence in early 20th century Philippines. University education promoted the separation of church and state, even as Catholic educational institutions tried to perpetuate an old Hispanic colonial order. The Filipino began composing music no longer for churches but for daily life and celebration. Nicanor Abelardo of the UP College of Music wrote in a modern form the art song Kundiman. Musical theater took up political themes, notably anti-American sentiment. A nationalist, emotional register could be detected in literature. Man became the subject of art as the musicians and writers stepped in the free and creative atmosphere of learning, pursued humanist themes ranging from love and romance to the loftier aspirations for the freedom and well-being of Inang Bayan. The notion of love and romance was fused with expressions of love for the nation. Turning away from images from music created for the church, everyday life became a vital source of artistic inspiration. These themes were fleshed out alongside more abstract ideals of class struggle, labor issues, agrarian problems, and nationalistic sentiment. The nation is a modern political idea. For the Philippines, which declared itself a republic in 1898, the nation formed from a successful war for independence and sovereignty. That modern nation was colonized again during the period in which the UP was established. And so the tensions between and among nationalists, the unquenched desire for sovereignty, another colonial yoke, new modern ideas, and globalization was to forge concepts of nation in the Philippines that were deeply invested in education. Cartographic representations best evoke the geographic concepts of what Philippine nation was. Maps created by the American colonial administration provided immediate visual forms that seemed to capture the totality and detail of the national community. These, in particular, are visual tools that group and categorize the populace, providing information that assisted policy making with the colonial imperative. But these maps also strengthened the idea of a Filipino community to the Filipino. Equally significant in the emergent imagining of a nation were the Filipinos, who became more visible in the public sphere, with some exercising leadership in various positions within and outside of the university. In 1915, UP would have its first Filipino president in Ignacio Villamor. By 1924, the entire College of Medicine faculty would be composed of Filipinos. So here we have PGH bassinets. UP PGH inserted American-style infant care into the country, replacing physicality with a spirit of science and independence. In a way, it speaks metaphorically of the birth of this concept of a nation that grew from a more secular, scientific environment that the university helped engender. The University of the Philippines became a rich and fertile ground of concepts that allowed Filipinos to think about what a republic could be in the community of nations and who the citizen of this republic might be. The colonial nursery of this nationalism strengthened the ideas of the modern, the secular, the university, the tropics, and the Filipino as part of a social project. The UP pioneered public health systems, crossbreeding of ideas, plants, and animals, a critical imagination, an understanding of the tropical environment, and the unique way of being a citizen in a nation in the making. The outcomes of these ideas, as they played out in the 20th century, will be analyzed by today's and future generations. The museum hopes to challenge its viewers to think critically, as this is the main task of any academic institution on the past, present, future of this university and of this nation. Think. My, your, our ideas matter.